Britain is a maritime nation. Her wealth has always depended on an interaction between the land and the sea. And though it is not always a harmonious relationship, man has been helped in his struggles by safe havens such as these. Men have always come together to make their living where the land meets the sea. Fishermen have gone out from ports like these and returned with rich catches. At Staithes, the houses stand shoulder to shoulder, affording one another protection against the harsh elements of the North Yorkshire coast. The tide washes in relentlessly, as it has always done. The sea's gentle power is shown here at Flamborough Head, where it has carved the rocks into vast imaginative sculptures. Like a discontented artist, ever seeking perfection, the tide's work is never done. It worries here at a rock, there at a cliff, leaving these creations for only so long before scrapping them to start again. But long enough for gulls to make a home here. The gannets cling precariously to the sheer cliffs. Guillemots, too, jealously guard their young, the fragile and the unyielding. Here, men have thrown the world's longest bridge across the Humber estuary. There are 44,000 miles of cable, enough to go almost twice round the world. The Humber Bridge is 1,542 feet long and 533 feet high. It is one small victory for man in the eternal struggle. Man has crossed the sea for centuries in boats such as these, leaving our shores in order to defend them, pushing out the bounds of empire. Raleigh, Drake and Nelson are but three of our naval heroes. No less heroic are the fishermen who have risked their lives to bring us food and prosperity, making a friend of our foe, the sea. Other ports grew rich on a different trade, the exchange of one sort of goods for another, bananas for steel, cotton for machine tools. Here at Hunstanton, the wash has taken a great bite out of the rich layer cake of cliffs. Turnstones scavenge among the cliff's debris like beachcombers, scrabbling among the shingle for crustaceans. And sanderlings wade along the shore. They breed in the Arctic, but winter here. What the sea takes up, the sea returns. Elsewhere along the east coast, estuaries are filling up. Once great ports are reduced to hamlets. While southern Lincolnshire has lost 1,500 hectares to the sea, Norfolk has gained 3,250. The action of the tides has turned cliffs into expanses of beach as dazzling and vast as in any tropical paradise. But without the weather to match, it is not people but the seals which take advantage of the bathing facilities. The seals come here to Blakeney Point on the North Norfolk coast every autumn, venturing ashore to breed like so many sunbathers packing the beaches on a bank holiday weekend, elsewhere that is, away from the winds that blow direct from the Arctic. For the most part, the East Anglian coast is a gentle place. Land and sea merge here. Man has taken flints from the chalky ground and built himself hardy dwellings. And he has exploited the flat landscape and those winds that blow across it, drawing his power from nature itself. This is a place that stands midway between land and sea, a place of marsh and reed, where the dark-bellied Brent geese come from Arctic climes to winter, feeding on their favourite grasses that grow here in abundance. They're a gregarious lot, rather like man. It's the sea that draws us too. All around our coasts, the Victorians built their piers, pointed fingers reaching out to sea. Cromer clusters round its headland, the houses seeming to clamber over one another to get the best sea view. And though the numbers of visitors are reduced by the package holiday, people still come here to rub shoulders under the pleasure domes of the English seaside resort. And for their sake, the inshore fishermen put to sea in tiny crabbing boats, landing their catch of Norfolk crabs, without which no holiday here would be complete. The Norfolk Broads. Here, man has created a network of waterways that spreads like a spider's web. The Broads were formed as a result of peat cutting in the 13th century. Today it is the reeds that are cut to maintain the reed bed and provide the best thatching material there is to roof the homes and even churches. The Broads are a fragile place. Man's presence here in vast numbers on the water threatens the homes of some of nature's most delicate creatures. Many of the windmills built to drain the fields at the water's edge are still in use today. Here, man and nature are in perfect harmony. But further south, on the Suffolk coast, it's a different story. At Dunwich, the sea has claimed a major victory. One night in 1286, a storm dumped 1 million tons of shingle across the harbour mouth, killing off the river's route to the sea and with it the town's source of income. Subsequent storms have chewed at the fragile cliffs. Locals have practically given up their attempts to hold back the tides, and the waves have claimed all but a handful of buildings. It's hard to believe now that Dunwich was once the premier port in East Anglia. The prosperity of these east coast towns depended on the coastal trade. Barges have shifted goods up and down the Thames and along the coast since Roman times. Today it's all done by container, leaving these fine sailing barges to more leisurely pursuits. Kent is the closest point to mainland Europe. As such, it has always feared invasion. At Dover, man has built one of the mightiest of England's fortresses. It's been called the Key of England. There have been Iron Age and Roman forts on this site, but most of what we can see today dates from the late Norman period. More recently, the castle was bombarded by the Germans across the Channel, but yet it held firm. For most Britons, Dover today is a gateway with no portcullis, the gateway to Europe. By far the most effective barrier to invasion has proved to have been nature's own. The white cliffs of Dover stare defiantly across the shortest stretch of water that separates this country from mainland Europe. But during the Ice Age, with so much water locked up in the great ice caps, sea levels fell round these shores by as much as 300 feet. That was more than enough to expose parts of the continental shelf and so join up Britain with the mainland. Then the tides took their revenge and broke through once more. Now it has taken 200 years of planning and experimenting and 6 years of building to reconstruct the link between Britain and the rest of Europe that was broken nearly 8,000 years ago. With the Channel Tunnel, Britain is no longer, strictly speaking, an island. Once again, man has triumphed over the sea. Here at Rye, it is the sea that has been the loser. This strange plain was once the bed of the sea. Now it's 2 miles away, and a new harbour had to be built in the Middle Ages. The ancient town, along with the Cinque Ports, was granted special privileges by the Crown in return for supplying ships to the royal fleet to help defend the realm. The warehouses are a reminder of when the sea lapped at the town. Like the sea, the invader will always take the line of least resistance. Here, where the ramparts are at their lowest, the enemy last succeeded in penetrating our shores. Pevensy's Shingle Beach was where William the Conqueror landed in 1066. Battle Abbey commemorates that defeat, or victory, for the English at least would not be what they are today without their Norman blood. Nothing is left today of the wooden castle William the Conqueror built at Hastings, and little of the stone one that replaced it. Weather, not war, has reduced it to ruins. We're a nation of sailors, and however small the craft, we're equally keen just messing about in them or competing fiercely. Beachy Head, one of the most dramatic landmarks on the entire coast, a point where the bare bones of England stick out. These stunning, icing sugar-white cliffs are part of a band of chalk that runs through eastern England from northeast to southwest, forming the wolds of Yorkshire and Lincolnshire, the escarpments of Berkshire and Dorset, the plains of Salisbury and Marlborough, and the downs of Kent, Surrey and Sussex. The Beachy Head Lighthouse is still a reference point for shipping in these parts, not only warning sailors of danger, but comforting them with reminders of home. Over the past 2 centuries, man has developed a peaceable use for the sea. George, the Prince Regent, first visited Brighton in 1783 and made a home there. Fashionable society followed, and soon less fashionable. To get away from the hoi polloi, the middle classes had only to spend a penny to stroll on their pier, while the Prince had his own pleasure dome, pushing good taste to its very limits. Today it's run by the council and open to the public. Portsmouth, one of the greatest natural harbours in the world, is reputed to be big enough to have contained the entire British fleet in its heyday. Portsmouth has been a military dockyard since the Middle Ages, and though its importance is somewhat diminished, it is still the country's chief naval station. HMS Victory is still a commissioned warship. When Lord Nelson took charge of her, she was already some 40 years old and well past the operational life of a modern naval vessel. Even so, knowing a good ship when he saw one, he made it his flagship at Trafalgar. England may have been well served by these wooden walls, but times were changing. The square rigging of HMS Warrior may hark back to the days of Victory, but when she was launched in 1860, she was the latest word in naval technology. She was powered by steam, and just as significantly was the first iron-hulled warship. Much of the work of today's fleet involves patrolling the seas, keeping the peace without ever needing to fire a shot in anger, just like Warrior in its time. The Navy's continuing role in the country's defences is a sign that even in the days of satellite communications, the sea is still as much a barrier as it is a bridge. It was a dubious tribute to Portsmouth's importance that it suffered so much in German bombing raids during World War II. but many of the old buildings have been restored to their former glory. The Isle of Wight. Here, at the westernmost point of the island, the sea has once more shown its dominance over the land. The Needles are all that remain of a chalk ridge that once linked the Isle of Wight to the mainland. The sea's power has honed the rocks to razor-sharp edges. Britain has always shored up its natural defences with man-made contrivances. Lyme Regis defended itself from the French in the 14th century with a curving seawall. The harbour, created by the Cobb, made Lyme a prosperous port. It has benefited too from its writers. Jane Austen set some of persuasion here, and John Fowles's French Lieutenant's Woman brought a new generation of literary tourists. Equally famed is the little town of Brixham in Devon. Once the foremost fishing port in the country, Brixham invented the trawler over 200 years ago. The boats travelled as far afield as Newfoundland, returning with rich catches. Today it has only a small inshore fleet, and tourists are the bigger catch. Many are drawn by the replica of Sir Francis Drake's Golden Hind, the first ship to circumnavigate the world in the 1570s. Few realise it is in fact a converted 1940s fishing smack. But it somehow seems appropriate in a place with such a long and unbroken seafaring tradition. But Drake is more normally associated with the city of Plymouth, Britain's second naval port. Explorers Gilbert, Frobisher and Sir Walter Raleigh also set sail from here on their voyages of discovery. Here on Plymouth Hoe, Sir Francis Drake is reputed to have insisted on completing his game of bowls before turning his attention to the defeat of the Spanish Armada in 1588. Now he stands guard over Plymouth Sound, where the waters of the Plym and the Tamar meet, and where today's Navy exercises still. The elegance of the Tamar suspension bridge spans the gulf between two worlds. Before Isambard Kingdom Brunel built his railway bridge in 1859, with it extending the railway into Cornwall, this was indeed another country, far more difficult to get to from London than was France. Cornwall is still a place of wild beauty, of mystery. The tiny granite island of St. Michael's Mount is linked at low tide by a causeway to the mainland. It rises 300 feet out of the sea and is topped by a fortified Benedictine priory. Mousehole has always been more accessible. 7 years after the defeat of the Armada, Spanish galleons returned here to sack the town. Since then it has earned its living from fishing and more recently tourism. The mild winters and gentle summers give the place a Mediterranean air. Man's attempted invasions have occupied no more than a wink of time's eye. But the hard local granite has stood firm against the Atlantic breakers for millions of years. And for all the development that inevitably accompanies the visitor, this is still a uniquely beautiful place. This is where the land finally admits defeat and abandons itself to the sea. Yet Land's End, the southwesternmost tip of a great maritime nation, still shakes its clenched fist at the waves. The North Cornish coast is harsher than the south, so villages and towns shelter deep in creeks and estuaries, safe from the pounding seas. Like Padstow, settled in the 6th century, it thrived on trade. Grain from North America came east as emigrants wanting to make a new life in the New World went west. But in common with most Cornish ports, fishing was a major business. Once, catches of up to 1,000 tons were landed on this coast. It took nets the size of several football pitches to contain them. Villagers used to salt the fish and stack them 4 feet high. Later, herring were packed in ice to be sent to the markets of London. Today, as a result of overfishing and European fish conservation regulations, catches are small, and in common with much of the southwestern peninsula, Padstow's prosperity now depends on its ability to sell itself in the tourist marketplace. Many of the old fishermen's cottages have been turned into galleries and tea houses or gift shops and antique stores. For much of the day, with the fishing smacks out at sea, its harbour becomes a playground for adults and children alike. Tintagel speaks to us of a far older world, a world of mystery, romance and legend, for this is reputed to be the birthplace of King Arthur. The connection was first made by Geoffrey of Monmouth in his History of Britain in 1140. There may be no archaeological evidence, but the spirit of the place suggests it's true. Victorian tourists, ever susceptible to a romantic tale, poured in, greatly encouraged by the owners of the railway. The post office dates from that period, but it's housed in a 14th century building. Castle. It's as though some giant once tramped this coast, leaving indelible footprints which the sea has rushed to fill. Boats can navigate the channel that winds between sheer slate cliffs and can reach the inner sanctum of the harbour, the only one on this coast between Padstow and Bude. A stream tumbles beside the village street, flanked by the neat white houses, the perfect model of a Cornish village. The countryside, too, is on its best behaviour in these parts. Mallards doze, as if half drugged by the profusion of wild flowers that grows on these banks. The mist shrouds the tragic history of this part of the North Devon coast. High in the hills above Lynmouth, in a place as mysterious as its name, the Valley of the Rocks, here on the edge of Exmoor, 1,000 feet above the village, gathered the waters that were to bear witness to the tragic power of nature. The river today is as it was the day before tragedy struck, little more than a stream. But one night in 1952, it swept through the village as a torrent, destroying 100 houses and claiming 31 lives. The deceptive power of water is seen again on the River Severn. All around our shores the tides are relentless. Twice a day the sea and the land change places. But nowhere is the change more curiously done than here on the Severn estuary, where several times a year the tide races up the river in a single 6-foot wave, known as the Severn Ball. The water level rises a remarkable 30 feet in an hour. Slimbridge, close to the estuary, is home of the Severn Wildfowl Trust and home to the biggest gathering of wildfowl anywhere in the world. The trust was established just after the war by the naturalist Sir Peter Scott. Mute swans live alongside black-neck swans. Hawaiian nei-nei geese allow their young to dabble at the water's edge. While the black-necked swans carry theirs piggyback fashion. Sir Peter set up Slimbridge because he believed the public should be better educated in ornithology, his own life's work. Busy shoveler ducks trawl for food with their specially designed bills. The tufted duck with its distinctive black plume. The pochard dives for its food, like its cousin, the tufted duck. Across the wide expanse of the Bristol Channel is another place, another country, the Principality of Wales. They call this part Little England beyond Wales, Pembrokeshire. And just off its western tip, Scoma. Ancient remains indicate the island was once well populated, but the people have long gone, leaving it a little Eden, a demi-paradise, home only to nature. Now Scoma is the haunt of some of Britain's wildest birds. Their voices are the sound of loneliness. Kittiwakes are distinguished from the common gull by their black legs and are named after the sound they make. Razorbills breed here. They are the nearest surviving relative to the great auk, which has been extinct for generations. The economy of nature is nowhere better shown than on these remote cliffs, where rabbits and puffins share their burrows. Elsewhere in the Principality, man has attempted to impose himself upon the wilderness and on his fellow man. Harlech Castle was built in the 1280s by Edward I to consolidate his victories against the Welsh in North Wales. Carnarvon Castle is perhaps the finest medieval castle in all Europe, and the town seems to nestle against its walls for protection. Here, Edward I installed his son as Prince of Wales in 1301, a procedure not repeated until 1911, when the ill-fated Edward VIII-to-be was invested here as Prince of Wales. In 1969, it was the turn of Charles, the present bearer of the title. Man has also put his ingenuity to more peaceable uses, linking the island of Anglesey with the mainland by means of a fine suspension bridge. No work of man, though, can compare with the splendour that is Snowdon. But nature is more fragile than it looks. The red kite was all but lost to Britain. Only careful conservation saved it from the realms of mythology. Looking directly out towards America, Liverpool has always been a jumping-off point for migrants and a port for merchants. Here the land meets the sea and has made it its servant. Today, much of the cargo remains a mystery, transported as it is in containers. As at Bristol and London, bigger ships have moved the port downstream to deeper waters. But the city has been left a fine architectural heritage by its maritime past. The magnificent pierhead buildings, more Manhattan than Merseyside, have been cleaned. It's not only the details unnoticed under a century of grime which have been restored, so too has the civic pride which built the place. Despite the hard times it's been through, there's a resilience about Liverpool, just as you might expect from a city with a main street called Hope. Here in Scotland, The contest between land and sea has been just about even. The scene is a product of centuries of compromise, the sea as friend, but also as dangerous adversary. Between the west coast and the islands, the sea can be both gateway and barrier. The people of islands such as Bute depend on ferries for essential supplies. In summer they bring tourists, day trippers from Glasgow and Sassenachs too, to stroll or rest on Rothes's esplanades. And there are albums full of pretty views to be snapped up. But during harsh winters, it's a different story. Island life is never easy, not even here in the beautiful Kyles of Bute. The wind and sea play a mighty fugue on the organ pipes that are Staffa. In 1829, Mendelssohn came here and found the inspiration for his overture. The English had discovered the island in the 1770s and claimed it as a part of the new Romantic movement. Then the visitors included Wordsworth and later Tennyson and Queen Victoria. Fingal's Cave is named after the Celtic giant who is credited with the building of the geologically similar Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland. The basalt columns were formed by the rapid cooling of a flow of lava. Less prosaically, Queen Victoria described the scene as a great entrance into a vaulted hall. Iona has been home to a monastery since St. Columba first built here on the site of a Druid temple. It's also the burial place of 60 kings, from Norway and Ireland as well as Scotland, and a place of religious pilgrimage. The Hebrideans are a proud people, not willing to depend on the scraps handed out by tourists. They fight their own battles, and each of these remote communities has its own tale to tell. The Inner Hebrides yield little to the crofter. But wherever the struggle is won, or nature relents with a small and sheltered haven, they have built themselves a home, as here at Portree on the Isle of Skye. Scene of some of the most violent volcanic activity in geological history between 50 and 60 million years ago, the Coolins rise to over 3,000 feet. Time has not yet weathered and moulded them. They're as nature first made them. From the air, they look like a child's papier-mâché model. Fancy suggests you could almost poke a thumb through them. But these rocks are hard. Their crags sharp and real. Only the play of the constantly changing light lessens the severity of their sawtooth ridges. In the more hospitable valleys, crofters built their crofts to share with their animals. Skye is a place people love or hate. It raises the spirits or depresses the soul. But few could fail to be warmed by such sights. The world over, the west is the best for sunsets. Just 2 hours by ferry, but 1,800 million years apart in geology, are the Outer Hebrides. Hardy sheep have been bred since Neolithic times. Their wool is spun by hand and turned into Harris tweed. There are some 18,000 crofters in the Highlands and Islands. But these days, many have to supplement their income with fishing, tourism, or by working in the oil industry. Here, the enemy is not the sea, but time itself, which has eroded away what little soil there ever was on what are some of the hardest rocks in the world. The seals may well outnumber the people in the remoter islands, but no one troubles to count them. They take nature in their stride here. The grey Atlantic seal is a common breeder off Britain's west and north coasts, but it's less than popular with the fishermen, as it provides them with stiff competition. Land and sea meet precipitously. Only the fulmar seems quite at home nesting here, and it will spit out an evil-smelling oil to ward off intruders. As the waves beat their fists against the cliffs, a kittiwake hen guards its eggs. John O'Groats, Scotland's Land's End. This is the most northerly settlement on the British mainland. Another point of pilgrimage. People come simply because it's there, 877 miles from Cornwall's Land's End. It was named after the Dutchman Jan de Groot, who was commissioned to begin a ferry service to Orkney by King James III. Its successors run still, plying the Pentland Firth in most conditions. Here the blue of sea and sky can be deceptively treacherous. James III had only just taken the Orkneys from Denmark and was keen to bind the islands more closely to his kingdom. Though most are uninhabited now, people have lived here for 6,000 years, earning a living from the land and searching the seas for a catch. Stromness, a safe landfall, where the Arctic whalers used to call. Captain Bligh rested here too on his voyages of discovery. The town's narrow streets hug the shore, the houses jostling one another for a view of what is going on in the harbour. A trawler with a rich catch, or a rich man's yacht perhaps. St Magnus Cathedral in Kirkwall was built in the 12th century by a Norseman. These shores have always looked more to Scandinavia than to England or even Edinburgh. The green contours are more reminiscent of Denmark than Sutherland, and yet fierce cliffs guard their independence still. Among rich meadow grass and a blaze of kingcups nests an oyster catcher. This large bird uses its distinctive red bill to rummage along the shore, feeding on mussels and, though presumably only in season, oysters. 110 miles north lie the Shetlands with their eponymous ponies. Short-legged and stunted as if to keep a hold on these windswept isles. Sure-footed and more reliable than the wheel on this rough terrain, they were highly prized by the local crofter. In the 19th century, many were shipped south to take the place of children in the mines of Northumberland and Durham. More recently, many have been pampered as children's pets. Their coarse tails were used too to make fishing lines by local fishermen. Until the discovery of oil, fishing was the main source of income for the islanders. All fishing communities are tight-knit, but Shetland's remoteness adds to the sense of camaraderie and self-dependency. The men still mend their nets in the traditional manner. Oil may have brought a temporary prosperity, but the canny Shetlanders know it cannot last, and they will stick to tried and tested ways of bringing home a good living, putting to sea as their forefathers did before them. Frosse, the Vikings called this place, Island of Horses. Mainland, the Orcadians call it today, so marking their attitude towards the rest of Scotland. Puffin Island, they might term it, for these cliffs resound to their calls. These comic-strutting birds with the technicolor bills breed in burrows in huge numbers on Orkney. If there's any overfishing in these parts, here is your culprit. Orcadians use the excuse to cull puffins annually, and visitors may even find them on the menu. Guillemots abound here too. These dagger-billed birds breed on cliffs, the hen laying a single tapered egg so shaped that it cannot roll off the steepest of ledges. South, and back on the mainland proper, Aberdeen is traditionally the centre of the Scottish fishing industry. But as in Shetland, of late the trade has been supplanted in importance by another rich catch from the ocean, North Sea oil. And though the auctioneer's cries still ring out in the fish market, theirs is an industry in decline. But the oil industry has taken its place in recent years so successfully that a new and prosperous face has been applied to the granite city. The tiny island of Inchcombe in the Firth of Forth was home to a hermit who in 1123 gave shelter to King Alexander I during a storm. In gratitude, the king built this Augustinian abbey. Twin tributes to man's ingenuity are the Forth rail and road bridges. The cantilevered rail bridge opened in 1890. The painting of its girders was once legendary. Now its anti-rust paint glows in the sun. The bridge first opened up the markets of Edinburgh to the industries of Fife. And the road bridge, opened in 1964, took tourists in the opposite direction. Now both form a magnificent gateway from the sea to Scotland's first city. Edinburgh. No country can be prouder of its capital than Scotland is. The castle on its outcrop of volcanic rock dominates the city. It is in fact two cities, the old medieval town and the Georgian new town built after 1767. Its sobriquet, the Athens of the North, comes from the fact that it gave a home to so many artistic figures: Boswell, Scott, Carlyle, a tradition continued today in its annual festival. Leisure pursuits of a less artistic kind tend to be carried out here. Like the English, the Scots too like to wait till they get to the seaside to let their hair down. North Berwick is Edinburgh's Brighton. And though its streets are perhaps more modest, it provides a similar wide range of leisure activities for holidaymakers. The romantic shell of Tantallon Castle, built in the 14th century, overlooks the natural fortress of Bass Rock. Once this was Edinburgh's Alcatraz. Now it's home only to a colony of 40,000 gannets. Despite the Scottish and English blood that has been shed here, today the border is easily crossed. The only barriers that remain are those between land and sea, and even they are almost imperceptible. Here the boundaries shift with the tides. Lindisfarne, or Holy Island, can be reached across a causeway only when tides permit. Since the closure of the island's school, a mainland school has to time its lessons to allow the children to make the journey. This route was taken too by St. Aidan, who went out to spread the Celtic gospel throughout the Saxon kingdom. Monks have worshipped here ever since, cut off physically from the world at all but low tide, just as they've chosen to cut themselves off spiritually from the rest of mankind. The present priory dates from 1082, and pilgrims have been coming since then. Visitors today, wandering among its sandstone remains, can feel the same sense of peace. Lindisfarne Castle. Until the middle of the 16th century, the crag itself was thought to be sufficient defence against the Scots invader. But the Scots never came. From this coast, fishermen have ventured out for 2,000 years, and they've built their settlements as a refuge from the elements. But Alnmouth, on a favoured spot on the North Sea coast, has been betrayed by the sea it was built to serve. The River Aln changed its course in the early part of last century, cutting the town off from the sea and stunting its prosperity. Warkworth's river, the Coquet, has served to protect it. providing a natural moat for the 12th century castle. Such was its importance in medieval times that its defenders and attackers read like a cast list from Shakespeare's history plays. The remoteness of the Farne Islands has granted them a tranquility not afforded to the mainland, and meant seals and seabirds have been able to breed here undisturbed by man for centuries. The ancient castles of Northumberland, like Dunstanburgh, look out to sea, watchful of an enemy that may yet come that way. But today their greatest threat comes from the sea itself, and its sibling elements, the wind and the rain. Man has always fought the sea, but seldom tamed it. He has used it as a source of food. He has used it in his defense and as a means to attack. And he has left around the coast the evidence in stone of his struggles. Time passes, and the works of man decay. Bamborough Castle was built by the Saxons and rebuilt by the Normans. By the 19th century, only a shell remained, and it took a large part of the Victorian medievalist Lord Armstrong's fortune to restore it to the perfect replica we see today. Man and nature, sea and land, past and present, all form a perfect synergy. It is the accumulation of all our yesterdays, the bravery of our sailors, the struggles of our soldiers, the patience of the farmer and skill of our builders that have combined to form the splendour that is Britain.